bit more about how things are going as we go. But first of all, I think it's very important that we acknowledge, like to acknowledge the lands on which we're all meeting today and pay respects to their elders past and present and emerging. I also acknowledge my gratitude that we share this land today and my sorrow for some of the cost of that sharing, and my hope and belief that we can move to a place of equity and justice and partnership together. Welcome everybody tonight's presentation. I think at the moment we have about 15, 16 people attending, which is a pretty good turnout in terms of in recent times. So thank you very much for logging into the webinar tonight. We are on a major, pretty much continually now on a major recruitment drive to find foster carers, and I am a carer practice manager here, so my job is to do these presentations and try to answer your questions in the first instances of your inquiries. At the moment there is an overwhelming need for new foster carers, and it's becoming more and more difficult to place. And so yes, we're needing to get as many foster carers on board as we can so that we can place children. However, I will say also that if this session is as far as you go with respect to the process and it turns out to not be for you, I do still appreciate your interest, because even if you don't go any further tonight or with foster care, the chances are you'll speak to someone about what you've heard, speak to a neighbour who might talk to their sister, who might talk to someone else at school, and eventually somebody, it might just land on just the right person to take it a little bit further. So I do appreciate the time that you're spending here, and certainly welcome you to share the information that you see and hear tonight to see whether or not we can raise the bar a bit with regard to how many foster carers we have available. In terms of introductions, my name is Avril, and I am the care practice manager and manager of the team that looks after all the recruitment and assessment of new foster families. A big part of my job is getting out and talking about foster care wherever I can, and doing these webinars. One of the good things about the changes that COVID brought with it is that it's given us some space to think about the different ways that we can talk to people and get people involved in these conversations about foster care, and a great way to keep connected through these webinars has emerged, and we're going to continue it. Joining me tonight is Deb, who's a Life Without Barriers Carer Ambassador, a specialist.
Hi.
Oh, yes, a specialist respite carer, and also one of our safe environments facilitators. I'm just going to let Deb's face will come up when she speaks, so I'll throw over to her now just to tell you a little bit about herself, how long she's been a carer, and a little bit of a summary on the work that she's doing as an ambassador. Over to you, Deb.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. So I have been a foster carer with Life Without Barriers since 2014, and I am an emergency and respite carer. So during the almost 7 years I've been with Life Without Barriers, we have provided placement care to 6 boys and 6 girls. And a number of those young people have been Aboriginal, and we provide school holiday respite to 2 little Narrandjeri sisters who are will be 11 and 12 in July. We've known them for 4 years. In terms of the foster care ambassador work I'm doing, we have been working for the past couple of months on putting together an engagement plan, myself with 2 other ambassador colleagues and Avril, and we are planning to go out and visit a number of organisations to talk to them about foster care recruitment. So really nice to meet you all over the screen, the wonders of technology. And please feel free to ask any questions as you go along. Thank you. Back to Avril.
Thanks, Deb. Excellent. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. Before 2020, of course, these sessions were run at community centres, so I'd need to tell you where the toilet is and the coffee and the tea is. Clearly, that's not necessary here. I'm sure you've got all of those things covered. What I do need to point out, though, is that we can't see any of you. We can only see that you're logged in and what you might type in the chat box to the right of your screen. I think you'll find it. You can also pick up and drag the picture of me around if it gets in the way of your PowerPoint presentation. Deb will be keeping an eye on what's happening in the chat box and we'll interject with questions and answers as required. Sometimes Deb might not answer directly, especially if she knows that the answer is coming up in the PowerPoint shortly. And we certainly will have a lot of opportunity at the end of this presentation to answer any questions that might come up for you. Also, if anybody has any tech issues and the computer drops out, you just need to click back on the link to come back in again. And hopefully that's not going to happen. Similarly, if I drop out, I will log back in as quickly as possible and we'll get started again. But hopefully I've resolved all of my internet issues from the last thing. Also, I'll just let you know we have another person sitting in the background, which is Sharon Scott, who's our marketing lead. Sharon will shortly post or be posting into the chat box at various times through this presentation a link to the Call Me Back form, which you just click on that link and it'll pop up a little form for you to fill in your name and details, and you'll get a call back within, I think it's within 24, 48 hours for the most part. We've got a pretty good turnaround with the callbacks. And also she'll a little bit later on put some links into the screen with some links to foster care stories on our website. So keep an eye out for those as they come in. So the plan for tonight, I'll give you a bit of an overview about Life Without Barriers as a whole, because we're so much more than just foster care. So just so you know who you're dealing with. And we'll talk about foster care, what it is, who needs it, and how to become one. And that'll take, you know, around half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on questions and things that we might pick up on the way. Then we'll answer some common questions. So I've got some frequently asked questions that we'll just move through and give you some information about taking the next step. If after all of that you're still keen to take that next step, we'll have that link, of course, in the chat box, which I think Sharon's just put up there now, just for you to have a look at. And it's very quick form. And it just asks for your name and contact details, and we'll call you in a few days to further progress your inquiry or answer any questions that you might have had that we didn't answer for some reason. So first of all, moving on to the fun stuff and testing out your tech savviness there. Perhaps if you could put in the chat box to the right-hand side of your screen where you are watching this particular webinar from, what town or suburb are you living in, and we'll just go briefly through those to see who's the furthest away. I have a sense that somebody might be here from Queensland, which might be the furthest away we've got. Gilberton, Modbury and Adelaide, Athelston, Hewitt. I'm in Gawler. So Fairview Park, Camden Park, Salisbury East, Port Adelaide. Right, so a good a good spread across. Oh, and someone from Dubbo, New South Wales. I think Queensland's a little bit further away. My geography is shocking, but that's fantastic. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to log in and have a look. That's really great. Thanks. So another question, just out of curiosity, that just wondering how long you might have thought about foster care. If you would like to pop your answer in the screen, in the chat box there. Some people see an ad and just do it straight away. Some people have, yeah, a year or 2 years, 15 years, Lynn. That's certainly some good, long, hard thinking there. And 6 months and a few months, a year. That's great. It's usually people that have, yeah, just learn about it or have been remunerating or thinking about it for, you know, for quite a number of years and just trying to organise their lives in a way or see how their lives pan out to be able to look and seriously consider foster care. So I appreciate the and 5 years, and someone saw the ad last week. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So before we get into the nitty gritty of foster care, I'll just talk very quickly about Life Without Barriers and what we're about, just so that you know who you're dealing with. So who is Life Without Barriers? We're a leading national social purpose organisation with a mission to partner with people to change lives for the better, hence the name Life Without Barriers. We support over 23,000 people in more than 500 communities across Australia. We've got offices in every state. We were founded in 1995 in Newcastle, New South Wales, and our initial services were purely around supporting people with disabilities. Our head office remains in Newcastle, but with a satellite national office in Sydney, and of course offices in all states and the Northern Territory. Here in South Australia, we have our main office in Unley, and we have satellite offices in Mount Gambier and Port Pirie. And we also have an office, a small office in Salisbury as well. So, but predominantly the majority of our work is done out of our Unley office. So in South Australia in particular, we care about and support families and children in our foster care, residential care, supported independent living programs, which are just emerging now, and also transition from care programs. We have a disability service that includes NDIS support and coordination, and also disability residential support as well. We've got mental health team, we've got alcohol and other drug programs, we do aged care support to enable our elder population to remain at home in the community for as long as possible. We also support people that are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. We have a refugees and an asylum seeker program, and we've got a very strong commitment to improving the outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We also are very strong advocates for people from culturally diverse backgrounds and other populations who are vulnerable to social exclusion. So we do have a loud voice where we see injustice in this world, and we do our very best to raise and meet the needs of people across a broad range of areas, as you can see there. We're pretty serious about our commitment to our values. I know a lot of big corporations put up all their values and everything, but I do have to say that even in our recruitment process, we do look and consider these values as parts of the people that we join and partner with, and also that we employ. So of course, relationships and building good, solid relationships are critical in the work that we do across the board. We do try to be imaginative and think out of the box to try and break down barriers for people to access things in the community. We're intensely respectful of everybody that comes to us for help. We're responsive, so we do try to respond as quickly as possible rather than wait for too long. And of course, we're very brave and courageous, so we do speak out, as I said, when we do see and hear things that we feel need to change. So we've got a very strong mission statement also when it comes to caring for children, and we believe that everybody shares this responsibility. Every child has a right to feel safe and respected, and we all have the responsibility to make sure that their safety comes first and that they're all well cared for, protected from abuse, and given the respect that they deserve. We've got a training program called We Put Children First, Understanding Child Sexual Abuse, which you can access on our website if you want to find out more about that. And if you become a foster carer, that particular training is one of the mandatory modules that will be required to complete. That, of course, was brought about and begun in earnest after the Royal Commission of Child Sexual Abuse in state care. So we're really, really strong and hot on that particular topic. So that's us as an overview, very quick overview of Life Without Barriers. And now I will move to a particular focus on foster care and what foster care is. So it is the temporary or permanent placement of children who cannot live with their families. At the moment in South Australia, it is around, doesn't have anything to do with the adoption side of caring for children from in care. However, there is some legislative work going on at the moment that is considering and trying to pass a bill that will allow adoption from state care, but that might be a few years running yet. So predominantly the children that we provide care for in foster care are children that have had experience of abuse and neglect, abandonment, or other issues of child safety. Foster care provides, of course, a safe and caring environment for children, while the Department of Child Protection, who's the primary player in these situations, determines what's next for that child, whether or not they go into long-term care, whether concerted efforts are done to support the family to be able to return the child to care. Children come into care at all ages, from newborn, fresh out of the hospital, and right up from, young people that are 15, 16 years old, even 17 years old, if there's a good argument for it, to come into a care arrangement that's not with their biological family. And it also goes from one night, it can be, to until the child turns 18, and often beyond when we take on long-term care options. So as you work through the assessment process with our staff, if you decide to go forward with foster care, you will discover and find out about the ways and the type of care that's best suited to your particular situation, to your families and the skills that you have. But whatever you choose to do, your commitment will be valued. Some people just do the overnight respite things. Some people do long-term. There's a lot of flexibility in the type of care that you're able to provide, which I'll cover for you as we move through here. So in South Australia, again, and I say this because we do have New South Wales and Queensland people attending as well. I am a bit SA centric with regard to the information in this particular session, but there's not a lot of difference between some of the aspects of our foster care. So we've got two main differences in family-based foster care. And one is the type and the length of stay, which I've kind of touched on just before, and the other is the complexity of needs. So that can be certain young people that have really high needs, and other people that, other young people that kind of float along and do okay and don't require a huge amount of support. So with regard to the length of stay, we've got, again, I've touched on this a little bit before, we've got short-term and emergency placements, which emergency can be for 1 night or up to 7 nights. And then anything after 7 nights becomes a short-term placement. We have long-term foster care, of course, which is until a child turns 18 years of age. And then we also have the respite and weekend care. And that also, as Deb referred to for her, was she does school holiday. Our respite carers often do school holiday care as well, to be able to provide some, some breathing space for some of our carers, and also for kids to sort of get out into the community and be part of something a little bit bigger. So the complexity levels in South Australia, young people get referred are either a general placement or a specialist one. In theory, young people with general foster care placements have less complex needs, but the children that require specialist placements have more complex needs, and carers are required to have a higher level of training and commitment to meet the needs in a therapeutic way. In reality, though, nearly all of our children have some level of complexity as they come into foster care. We certainly train all of our carers to be able to provide a therapeutic and attuned support for young people, but specialists generally need a lot more training and support because of the intensity of the needs. So just what those needs might look like, I just want to touch on as well. So that can be due to learning difficulties, developmental trauma caused by abuse and neglect can lead to developmental delays, and intellectual disabilities and things like that. We also have children who have processing disorders, again, generally related to the trauma they've experienced, so they have difficulty in communicating what their needs are. Of course, children, as I mentioned, with intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities. And then we have our young people with our complex and challenging behaviours. Quite often those are children and young people that are in the older age group, and that have experienced long and prolonged experiences of abuse and neglect. And we also have those young people who are just the whole box and dice and all of the above. So, and of course, we do provide intensive support in those situations. And we highly value our specialist foster carers as a result. So specialist carers need to be more flexible and readily available. Because of that, they get a higher reimbursement in terms of payment for the care that they provide. They're also provided with much more regular and intensive support, and they get extra training and a whole lot of other access to our clinical support programs and all sorts of extra bits and pieces to really hold a child safely in a placement, but also support carers to have the continued energy to provide that high level of care. So now I'm just going to turn my attention, or our attention, to the reasons why some people come into foster care, but why young people find themselves in care. Some of them, of course, are really quite obvious in terms of, abuse and neglect. But we also have a number of children requiring care where there's illness or death of a parent, and there's no other family options available to the young person in terms of being kept within their own networks to be cared for. And that, is quite surprisingly more often than what you would think sometimes. When I first sort of started in this business 18 odd years ago now, it certainly was not something that I expected that a lot of children would require. If you think about the current COVID crisis, the unfortunate reality, of course, is that people are losing their jobs and housing and things like that, and people become more and more vulnerable in terms of things in society that smack them around a bit. So poverty, and homelessness becomes an issue where young people are not able to be cared for by their parents because they simply don't have the means to do that. And this is where our social agencies are working very hard to try and fix that situation. Most of our parents don't wake up first every morning with an intention to hurt their children. But when they do have other difficulties, it often puts a strain on their ability to be able to focus on parenting. So, sorry, I've just lost my way a bit. Anyway, we are expecting, because of COVID, although now the news is sort of saying it's not quite as dire in Australia as what we were expecting in terms of housing and homelessness and unemployment. But we are, and the department did sort of give all agencies a bit of a heads up that in 6 or 12 months there may be a spike in need for foster carers for children coming into care because of the impacts of COVID that are not yet known. So here's another question, just to make sure you're all still awake there, because I can't see your faces. If you want to put in the chat box how many children you think are currently in out-of-home care across Australia. So this is not just in South Australia. We'll go national statistics in this particular instance. I wonder if you can get... Cassie has given us a 50,000, any 36,000. Thank you. Well, one or two of you are close, 75,000, 300,000. So, yep, you're all up there in the... Is that 6 dots? No, that's 5. That's 100,000. Oh, God. My eyes, when zeros go, I can't quite see that. Right. Okay, ready to reveal the answer? There we have, this is as at February, no, sorry, that's 2018 statistics. So that figure has probably gone up a little bit now. So we would say probably around 47,000 young people across Australia in out-of-home care arrangements. As at February 2020, South Australia, just for South Australian knowledge, has around 4,200 children in care, which includes a variety of different types of care, like residential care and kinship care, which are sometimes a little bit different. So yes, as such, of course, we need about 4,200 carers of all different shapes and sizes. So yes, very important that we continue to recruit. So in terms of calls made to the Child Abuse Report line, this is 2018 and 19 statistics. I'm hoping we'll get some updated statistics soon. But our Child Abuse Report line, which we lovingly refer to as CARL, received 70,297 calls over that particular year. And this is just a bit of a graph that shows the substantiated or evidence of harm over that particular year. So a lot of these are situations where the department has actually gone in and investigated and has substantiated that there has been an issue. So, of course, emotional abuse, which is one of the most difficult things to really detect and neglect, are our highest numbers, and then we have 18% with physical abuse and 13%. I don't anticipate for the next lot of statistics that we get that particular situation will have changed. The pie chart over the years remains relatively steady. So we've learned about the different types of foster care, and we've just unpacked how and why kids come into care. And now the rest of the presentation focuses on what we look for in foster parents and the process to becoming one. So who can be a foster carer? Now's the time to get out your pens if you want to take notes, because from here on in, I give you the answers to the full assessment process of everything that we're looking for. And yes, so you can have a cheat sheet when it comes to an assessor coming out to speak with you. This here gives you all of your answers. So, of course, the fundamental task of a foster carer is to provide a safe environment and form positive and nurturing relationships with children and young people in their care. We really aim to help these young people build new skills which are necessary to manage life events successfully. Quite often our young people have not had the greatest experience and role models to be able to learn how to manage stress and anxiety, to be able to function in community situations. And so we really do rely on foster carers to be able to provide that really nurture and role modeling and teaching kind of experience for young people. So these are the qualities that we look for, and these qualities in terms of the assessment process, there's a tool that we use that we're required to use when we assess foster carers called the step-by-step assessment tool. And throughout that particular process, these particular characteristics we're asked to comment on the carer applicants' presentation in terms of do they meet these or do they appear to have these attributes, which is, of course, warm and nurturing, altruistic. A lot of idealists become foster carers, and they're really the people that idealists and optimists are the ones that we're really looking for. But the one of this list that I really do want to point out is the last one that I've put there. We do need to have foster carers who are open to throwing the 101 parenting handbook out the window. There is, and we are taught as we grow up in this world in non-abusive situations, that children respond and learn and grow and flourish in a certain type of environment and with certain type of consequences and rules and things like that. For children that have experienced trauma and abuse, of course, their brains, and as we go through all of this, you'll learn about brain development for children who are continually faced with abuse and trauma and neglect. Their brains don't operate the same way as a child that hasn't had those kind of experiences. And so normal and standard run-of-the-mill parenting techniques and advice just do not work. And we need people that are able to accept that and think a little bit outside of the square and kind of to some degree counterintuitively parent the child that's in their care, because sometimes we've got to do exactly what you think we shouldn't do in terms of getting the response that we need and the teaching that's required for young people. So that one's really important, to be really open and flexible and adaptable in your thinking about how to care for children. So these are the qualities that we look for throughout the whole assessment process. So please do keep those in mind if you are going to move forward. And if you feel that you've got these attributes, please share them with the assessor as you go and talk about this kind of stuff, because that's the richness that brings us the really good carers. So who can foster? Essentially, really, if you want to, it's worth asking the question, can you? About the only non-negotiable in this is that you need to have a spare room in South Australia to be able to care for a young person. We can't have young people sleeping on the couch. So that a young person does need to have their own space and somewhere to put all of their things and to really feel like they belong somewhere. In terms of everything else, over 25 is somewhat negotiable as well. In Queensland, I believe 21 and over is the age. But again, in specific circumstances, if you are under the age of 25 and you want to consider foster care, it's worth asking the questions and seeing whether or not your situation is we're wanting foster carers to be flexible. What we also need to be as an agency is also flexible. Same with the department. You can be single or a couple in a same-sex situation, with or without children, children of young ages, children of older ages, any culture. You have to be well and have the emotional capacity to provide foster care, and also be available. So your availability is about being available for a young person that's put in your care, but also throughout the assessment process, because it is a fairly lengthy process and it gets extended out when your availability as an applicant is a little bit stunted because of other priorities that you might have in your life. So when you're ready, it's good to sort of try and clear your diaries for a little while so that we can get through all of this, all of the assessment components. So now, how do we support our carers? I have some carers that have said to me quite often, foster care, they used to think that it was scary, but it's not really scary. It is challenging. So the support that we provide is critical to ensure that foster carers remain confident and secure and the important role that they have. So there's a variety of different ways that we show how and support our carers. First of all, we've got the 24/7 phone support. So that's all out of hours, 365 days a year. We have a child and family practitioner who is on call basically to answer. It is a telephone support service, but we're able to access all sorts of other supports that sit alongside of that. Of course, during the day, every foster carer has an allocated child and family practitioner who is there to support and advocate for them. And so during business hours, you would contact your child and family practitioner, but out of hours, we have the 24/7 support. There's also the care team that's wrapped around a young person and the foster carer. So that's the Department of Child Protection, any support from medical right through to education, psychologists, anyone that has something to do with the ongoing care of that young person and helping them develop and grow and flourish would be part of that care team. We've got clinical support for our specialist carers specifically. In that clinical support, we'll do work directly with carers or directly with young people that are in specialist care. But for our general placements as well, they provide a consultation process as well. So our clinical team has got positive behaviour support specialists, psychologists, and a therapeutic artist as well on the team. Of course, there's the reimbursements, which I've mentioned before is a bit higher for specialist carers than it is for general. We have access to our employee assistance program, which is limited sessions with a qualified psychologist for any issues that you or your family face. We do a great and spend a lot of time trying to arrange really good social events that brings foster carers and foster children together in our community of care, with a living arts program that really is starting to grow and flourish and provide some really great experiences. We have respite, not necessarily for all cases. Sometimes it's not appropriate for a young person to sort of move away from a care environment for a little while they settle in and really get to know and feel connected to their foster carers. And then we start to look at opportunities for respite if it's required. But we also do like to encourage our foster carers to bring in their own support structures and networks around them, and have this child be part of the family. So in a natural family, you would have grandma and grandpa or aunties and uncles or, friends looking after if you need that date night or some time out, but where you're unable to have that sort of situation, we do our very best to provide support of a respite arrangement. And then we also have a very solid learning and development program as well. So we provide a bunch of online modules, and there's a learning and development plan that foster carers sign up to complete these modules online. We also do face-to-face training in a number of therapeutic parenting, therapeutic crisis intervention, our PACE models of care, all that sort of training. So we do that nurturing and attachment, trauma and attachment training. All of that's face-to-face and online in all sorts of different ways. Are you allowed to take foster children on holiday with you? I will answer that question at the end, because that's a frequently asked question, Lynn. So if you hang on with me to the end, I promise you that answer will be given. So the process to become a foster carer is that we have the inquiry stage to begin with, which is what you are currently sitting in. So that's this information night is your inquiry stage. And then if you want to go further and fill in that contact me or call me back form that Sharon will link, or Deb will put the link into the chat box again at some stage, that will get that phone interview going. And then from there, that phone call is a national call. So our national team does those phone interviews and then forwards candidates, viable applicants, to us as an agency in South Australia, where we organise and arrange a home visit to come out and have a chat about the final sort of bits and pieces, where you're filling in a whole bunch of information. We also, of course, during this inquiry stage, put you through our orientation training, which is called Shared Lives. And that is a 2-day training that you do need to make yourselves available for. I do believe we've organised now a 4-day or 4-session online module for that as well. But I would very much encourage you, if you can, to take the time to do the orientation training face-to-face. It is really an invaluable piece of time that you will spend with our assessors and trainers in terms of what foster care is all about. After that, we have the screening stage, which is where you are doing all of the paperwork. So these are your application, your police check, health checks, household safety checks, all of these bits and pieces that need to happen and be completed. We can't move forward with an application until we've got the police and child protection checks through. Health checks sometimes, if you've got underlying health conditions, that doesn't preclude you from becoming a foster carer, but it may mean that we need a GP letter that sort of says that there's no particular issue that would mean that it would be unsafe for you or a young person to become a foster carer. And then you move into the interview stage, and this is where things get really real, because we have our assessors. You're assigned an assessor, so it's the same person that you'll have involvement with from this point on, right up until your approval. And those are assessment interviews, which are 3 or 4 home visits that are quite lengthy. This is where your availability becomes really important. So we have our assessors organise a schedule of home visits. There's a bit of homework. There's some pretty deep and meaningful discussions and conversations that happen in that space to make sure that this is absolutely the right space for you to be in. Then they go away and they write up the assessment, which then comes back to you for reading, so that you can have a look at everything that's being said and how you're being presented to the Department of Child Protection as a viable is probably not the right word, but at the moment my brain's not thinking of another word for it, but as a very good candidate to become a foster carer. And then we submit that particular application to the Care Approval and Registration Unit, and we then we'll wait for them to process that particular thing to approve your registration as a carer. Sue-Ann, you work in disability, have a diploma in mental health, blue card, yellow card, police, current check. You please fill in the same form, click on that same link, and you will get a call back, Sue-Ann, absolutely. And yes, the more checks that you already have, and if they're within date, and not just about to expire or anything, all of those particular checks can be used. We don't necessarily have to go through everything again. The police check is a specific national one that sometimes is required, well, is definitely required by us as an agency. How long does it take? Well, a lot of this actually depends on how long it takes for you as applicants to complete the training and how quickly the assessment interviews are completed. So a lot of it does sit with your availability and whether or not you're able to drop everything and run. We do have assessors that are able to come out after hours. So if you do work full time, we can organise after hours and weekend visits. Of course, in those situations, sometimes it might take a little bit longer, but certainly we try, once we get to the point of where you've got your interviews, your home visit interviews, we have about a 6 to 8 week turnaround of getting that into the department for approval. Once it hits the department, I'm afraid I have no control over how long that takes. The department can take a long time. They can do it really quickly. At this day and age at the moment, we have such a shortage of foster carers that when we do put an assessment in, we let placement services know in the department that we have a carer awaiting approval, and if there is a placement that is really required, sometimes that can move the process through a little bit quicker. It does mean sometimes that from the moment that happens, you may very well be put in a position to think quickly and make some decisions about whether or not you're ready to hit the ground running. In other situations, we can talk about transitions. So, is this the right time for you? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. Do you have time to commit to the training? And we do try and be as flexible as we can around that. There are training modules and things that you do need to complete before the assessment goes in. And we try and get you through those as quickly as we can. Do you have time for someone to visit for your assessment video interviews? And are the other members of your family in a really good place to be able to support and be part of this journey with you as a foster carer? Sometimes, and also, you know, the young people are in your lives, are they ready to, you know, to be part of this new experience as well? So that's something as a family to sit down and talk about. And also, if you have had particular challenges and trauma in your own lives, do you feel that you're in a position now that you've moved through that and have been able to process that, where you can use that in a positive way to support a young person? We do go and talk about those sort of things in the assessment process when, with respect to your own personal experiences throughout your life. But certainly we do so with a great deal of respect and support, and help you unpack that to see whether or not you do feel that you're in a position where you can provide care. And certainly we do have a lot of foster carers who have had quite adverse events in their lives and have used that in a really positive way to care for children. So thank you for being here today. That pretty much ends it. I'm about to sort of go into the frequently asked questions, and then we're going to throw it open to you guys. And certainly I'm going to let Deb do a bit of the talking in terms of those answers, because I've done all the talking this time. But certainly if you're not in a position to foster care right now, you can still help children by talking about it in your community and encouraging people to either book into one of these webinars to get the information themselves, or even go onto our website and ask for a call back and have a conversation. Certainly we are trying to be quite prolific on our social media, and a lot of new campaigns are about to emerge in that space. So please do encourage others if you think they might be interested. So that's the end of the formal presentation, and I'll go through some frequently asked questions now. And of course that link has been popped back into your into the chat box there for the Call Me Back form. And frequently asked questions. I think, Lynn, this was your question. Can I take a foster child on holidays? Deb, would you like to answer that one?
Certainly. The answer is absolutely yes. And of course, there are always considerations. If the plan is to travel within the state, there will always be the conversations with all the associated workers. But it's all about giving the young person in care as much as possible of the family experience. If you're planning to go interstate or overseas, there are timeframes and processes that need to be put into place. So, Avril, you might want to add a bit there, because that's kind of the big picture that I know.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, certainly if you want to travel interstate, it's really important to be a little bit more planned than being spontaneous about that, and overseas, although overseas at the moment, I don't think the department at all will support any of that. But overseas, just to quick, a child, of course, needs a passport, and the department is the guardian, so the department will apply for that passport, and there's a whole bunch of things. So you really do need a good 6 to 8 months lead up to an overseas travel. You also do need, for overseas and interstate as well, an itinerary of where you're going to stay, how long you're going to stay there, and what your movements will be in different states. But in terms of interstate, that's a relatively quick process these days to get approval from the case managing office of with the guardian, so the caseworker, and I think it goes up to regional director in the department. But yes, if you can't be as spontaneous going interstate, you certainly can be very spontaneous moving within this. Within the state. So do I get to choose which school they go to? Again, absolutely, you can choose. Well, what we try to do is certainly children that are coming into your care for an extended period of time. The local school would be the place where we would enrol a young, or the department would enrol the young person. There's also opportunities for them to go to private school, and opportunities for the department sometimes to pay for that. I know the Catholic private school education now provides scholarships for young people under the guardianship of the chief executive. So we do try, if they're only going to be there for a week or so in an emergency placement, or of course respite placements, of course we wouldn't disrupt schooling in those sort of situations. Do I get a choice as to what child comes to live with you? Here you go, Nina. You anticipated that question right up. Deb, would you like to answer that one? Caught you by surprise, sorry.
That's okay. Well, as I would understand it, there would always be open discussion about what was happening, and there would be, because I'm emergency and respite, from my perspective, I'm always given a choice about, do I have the time and space to give that placement what it needs? I see no reason why that wouldn't be similar when we're looking at placing a young person for a longer period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, you do get a choice. We do provide you with a profile of a young person, and talk to you about what that young person's needs are from what we know at that time. Sometimes we don't know a lot about the child that comes. We might have a little girl that we know is 6 years of age and has come from a terribly poverty and neglectful existence, but the department may have only just she may have only just come to the department's attention at that point, and so we don't know a lot about them. So whilst you do get a choice about what child, sometimes the information that you're given is pretty thin, but we do work very hard to try and get as much information as possible. Next question, are they allowed to call me mum and dad? Again, Deb, your experience of that would probably be quite valuable.
Well, they call us many things. My partner Adam and I tend to introduce ourselves as Deb and Adam, but we tend to be called Grandma and Pop because our grandchildren are often involved in activities. But what we do is speak to our Life Without Barriers support staff about what the young person might have called other people that are special to them. So the long answer from me is they can do that if that's something that your family and the young person are comfortable with.
Excellent. Thank you, Deb. Yep, that's about right. So yes, and we do want to make the young person feel comfortable. Sometimes children walk in and call you mum and dad from the moment they see you, and there's no sort of understanding of what the word mum and dad really means. It is just that person that's going to look after me. So you must be a mum or you must be a dad. Other young people, of course, have a difficult time, but I think essentially the advice to give there is let the child make that decision and play around with it. Sometimes they call you mum, sometimes they go back to nan or to your first name, and then they go back to mum and move around as they get to know and feel comfortable. In there, Sue-Ann has asked, do you try to match a child to their own culture and faith? Absolutely, we do. In terms of our young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, there's a placement principle that means that we do definitely need to consider culture and carers that are specifically approved to provide care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children if they're not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander themselves. But also then we have, especially now with the increasing population of refugees and asylum seekers in Australia, we do try to aim as best we can to people that are either sensitive and appreciative of those other ways of living, to be able to support a young person to hold faith and support a young person to remain connected to their culture. So yes, we do our very best to match as best as possible in that situations. I will just answer that one to Nina. Seems odd that you wouldn't get much information about the child before placement. I would have thought that that would be very important to assist in making a decision. Absolutely, Nina, it is critical in making that decision, but unfortunately, the way that the whole system works, these young children, if they require immediate care, like a call will, for example, a call will go into the child abuse report line saying that there's a young child that is in imminent danger, and they're given the name and the address of where that child is, and the department picks that up and goes, right, we need to go out there immediately. We've never heard about this child before, and we walk out there and we find that that child is in a terribly difficult and dangerous situation for a young person of their age, and the department makes a decision to remove the child on the spot. From that point, we require a placement for that child, and from that point, we start to try and gather as much information. So we will talk to schools, or the department for the most part will talk to schools or anybody in the network, anything. Quite often when a child is removed though, the family and the family network shut everything down and they don't want to speak to anybody. They don't want to give them any information about the child because they're just hurting on so many levels. So we do try and get as much information that we can. If a child's been in care for a period of time and is moving into a placement, Mel, I'm sorry to see you go. Bye. I'm terribly sorry that someone's had to go. What time? But yes, so when a child's been in care for a little while, we can gather a lot more information. And when the child's been at school, or we can speak to teachers and get more and more information. But in the first instance, sometimes you do get a child and all you know is their name and their age, what suburb they were from, and what school that they went to. Moving on at the minute, but please do not stop putting your questions in. Are there any restrictions on pets? I've got all sorts of jokes in this space around, the pet shark in the back swimming pools probably needs to go, and elephants probably are not particularly welcomed in a foster care placement. But otherwise, if your pet is friendly and certainly not going to pose a risk to a young person, I will, there is no restrictions at all. If you're a crazy cat lady, as they call them, and you've got 27,000 cats sitting in your home and you're not particularly good at cleaning up after them, when it becomes a hygiene issue, of course, pets are an issue. And also if there's significant health needs of a young person, we wouldn't be matching to a home if the child is, terribly allergic or with asthma and animal fur and things like that becoming a bit of an irritant. And now that's the frequently asked questions. And if you've got any more questions, most certainly please do put them in the box and we'll go through. Again, Deb, would you like to answer that question that's just come up? Is there such a thing as emergency care being from 1 night to 2 weeks, or is that not guaranteed and can go on for 3 or so years?
Great question. Thank you, Jane. My understanding again is that emergency care is short term. And I remember from the message, from the presentation, it then moves to short-term care, but it's always done in consultation with the carers, with the young person, and with the associated care team workers. I've not ever known it to go on for 3 or so years unless the foster carers and the young person have decided they want to move together into long-term care. I may not be using exactly the right language though, Avril. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. Yes,
cool.
Emergency placements can last for 18 years, but that's generally the choice of the foster carer. So they can also go, sometimes they can go on for a few months. The way that the department works when they do a removal of a young person, the first 3 months is generally, they need 3 months to be able to decide what they're going to do next. So that moves to short term. So there's an emergency need for a placement because we've just removed and we need a placement. And we've got carers like the amazing Deb there, who is able to provide that emergency space while everybody quickly looks around to find someone who can look after a child for that 3-month period, which is short term. So maybe Deb, would get a child put into her care and say, well, we're definitely just emergency. And we say, well, we've got a carer that's going to be available in 3 weeks' time. Can you hold on for 3 weeks? And then Deb and Adam would have a think about that and go, yes, we can manage for 3 weeks. And during that time, we make connections with the carer that's going to take over, and we start to build a transition plan. In terms of the next question from Cassie, how much need is there for respite and emergency care currently? I can tell you there is an enormous amount of need for both of those situations. And certainly we find ourselves having to say no to a lot of emergency placement needs. So there is, and this is one of the reasons why we're out and about quite regularly now with these webinars and information sessions, because we do very much need, especially emergency carers, and respite carers certainly are always very, very valuable. How old does my youngest child have to be before I can foster? That's also a very good question, and it is also one that doesn't really have a straight yes or no answer. There used to be a hard and fast rule that a child needs to be older than a child that's going to come into your care, so you couldn't have a newborn infant yourself. However, now the situation is that we certainly encourage foster care applicants or people that are considering it and are really serious about it, no matter what their circumstances are with their own children in their care, that they, each situation is taken on an individual basis. And certainly if you tick all the other boxes, we certainly can think about what that looks like. Next question, do the parents or family have any right or input into the way your home may be run? That's a very good question, Sue-Ann. No, is the short answer to that. The way you run your home is the way, if there are specific situations where the child comes into your care and they have a certain disability, and the parents say, the child responds really, really well to, being on a swing for, giving them a swing or something like that. We might take suggestions in terms of how the parents would like to see, responses and things like that. But for the most part, they don't have very much input into that way, but they do influence, because especially in the space where it's a reunification space, where we're looking at trying to return a young person to their family, there's a few, sometimes there can be, jealousy of the birth family and things like that, where that can sometimes impact on the way the home is run, because the children come back a little bit confused. So there is a big piece of work and big conversation around the birth parents and their involvement with you as a foster carer, because that can change and look in so different in each and every situation. Next question from Michelle is, I'm not Aboriginal, however, my son identifies as his dad is Aboriginal and I support that. Would this be considered a culturally appropriate placement? Most certainly, if your son is, if you have connections to community and culture, there's an extra little layer of assessment that goes on if you're not Aboriginal. But if your partner is Aboriginal and he's becoming, he or she is becoming, wanting to be assessed as a foster carer as well, then absolutely that's definitely a culturally appropriate placement. But otherwise, if you're non-Aboriginal yourself as a foster carer applicant, there's an extra assessment that's called the B5 assessment, which is undertaken by an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person who works within our department or within Life Without Barriers. There's a particular training and an additional assessment that's required to have you approved to provide care. It's a very good question, actually, Michelle, and I will go back and have a think about that one, because if you've got your son in your care and he identifies as Aboriginal, then that's a layer in and of itself that I'm not sure how to actually answer that completely. So hold that space, and certainly in the Call Me Back form, we might be able to answer that question in the Call Me Back. In respite or emergency care, a good way to start respite or emergency care a good way to start before considering long-term foster care? Absolutely. Emergency care is something in and of itself. It is really takes a special kind of person to be able to be called at 5:30 at night saying we've got a young person that needs someone to come. I mean, Deb had this experience just this weekend gone, didn't you, Deb? Do you want to talk about that?
So, sure. It does take respite, I agree, is a great way to start emergency care, because the information can be quite limited, and it's taken my partner and I a little while to get our heads around how we can quickly build trust and rapport with a young person who's in crisis, because that's why they're with you, but it's not impossible at all. And but respite and emergency care I see as very different. Respite, remember, there are two young sisters that we see every school holidays. The young person on Friday night, the way we manage not knowing a lot about a young person and only having them for a weekend is we make sure that we have both my partner and I working together so that we can do tag team if we need a break, which we often do from the intense high level of activity, but it's not impossible at all. And we really, really, really enjoyed the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be a special kind of person to be able to do the emergency care stuff, but it really is incredibly rewarding when you do it. Certainly, short-term respite and short-term carers. Often, starting as a short-term carer is a really great way to get your foot in the water and understand and know the process and the system a little bit more. Justin, if it's emergency care, child being removed from a dangerous situation, is the foster carer kept hidden from the original family where required for their safety? Absolutely. In most circumstances, biological family don't hear of or know where the foster family live. It really is only when the situation, if that was to move, quite often when it moves to long-term care, and the foster family is accepting of that and positive about the child being placed somewhere really good that's going to be able to look after them. Quite often, foster families build relationships with biological family, and they do and organise quite a natural contact, a bit like a separated family where the child sort of shares a bit, goes and visits, extended family and things like that. So there is opportunities for that kind of thing to happen. But there are also situations, especially in that emergency space, where what we need to do is make sure that the child is safe and that there's a lot of assessment that goes around the parents. So yes, the foster care address and information that might lead that need a biological parent is kept incredibly confidential. Right, thank you very much, Deborah and Sharon. Oh, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Good night. And Sue Ann had to go as well. I think that then leaves us with, is there any more questions? Does anyone else have anything that they might like to add? Can you discuss the types of expected expenses to the fostering family and payments that are covered by being a foster carer, please? Right, yes, financial stuff, very important. So the department pays for all education and childcare expenses that might go into, so out of school hours care, childcare if it's necessary, any school card payments. The foster carers get an allowance at the beginning of every school term that helps out with school uniforms and books and bits and pieces. The department also covers any medical costs and all of that kind of thing. So sometimes we've got to poke the department a little bit to get them to take action on some of the things that are needed. The general care payment, so if you become a general foster carer, The general payment is considered a reimbursement for costs, and as with all children, there are out-of-pocket costs that quite often are not reimbursed, but certainly in situations where there is an additional outlay for a particular reason for a young person, the department puts in, and we do advocate with the department to pay a lot of things. For specialist care, it's a lot different. Specialist care reimbursement is considered in a lot of instances to be high enough for one partner to not have to work. So that it is fluctuating and changes in time, but with that reimbursement, there is an expectation that the carer is always available for the child. Like a lot of our specialist children perhaps can't do school full times or get sent home regularly from school because the excitement and the noise and all of the stuff around school situations just becomes so overwhelming for young people that they can't manage a full day at school. So we need a foster carer to be available in those situations to come pick the child up, or and also, you know, therapeutic appointments, medical appointments, family contact, all of the transport that goes around that. So in specialist care, the reimbursement's a lot higher because there's a lot more expected of the carer. In general care, the reimbursement covers most costs, covers one extracurricular activity or a sport like soccer or basketball or things like that, with the carer being expected to fund a second activity. And I'm just scrolling back up here. So is there specific funding for newborns? There's specific funding for placement setup in emergency situations and new placements. It is expected if you want to look after newborns, you get assessed for that. And like any sort of position that you get, the home safety check and all of that sort of thing would be checking that you have a cot, that you have a car seat or capsule. Quite often the department provides a capsule, and you have all the necessary gear to be able to look after a newborn. Some of that's negotiable, but for a lot of our carers that provide care for newborn babies, they just go out and buy it all themselves and have everything there ready for when a baby is needed. So what becomes difficult when if the department was to buy the cots and bassinets and everything is when that child leaves that placement, your placement as a newborn, and goes to a short-term placement or whatever the situation is, all of those things that the department bought for that child need to move with the child. And that's where things start to become really, really complex. So we do like foster carers to kind of have all of the equipment that's necessary to provide care for the type of child they're approved to provide care for already. So, and in terms of that emergency, there is an emergency setup payment for you to be able to go out and get formula and nappies and, you know, all of the sort of disposable things that are necessary to look after consumables. That's the word I was looking for. Esther says she already has all of her clearances, work as a specialist behaviour support practitioner in disability. So just wondering approximately how long would the process be until placement, flexible workplace, and can be available for interviews and home visits. Well, essentially from the point, what we do like to try, our biggest aim, and even the clearances and everything are done, and we try to get other stuff while we're waiting for things to happen. So the fact that you've got them means we don't have to wait on them before we move forward. So from the point of your telephone callback, if we go back to that call me back form, if you move forward from that telephone callback to become a foster carer, what we do try to do is say it's about a 5-month process, and we're trying to get that shorter and shorter. But because there's so much, there's training that we need to, and not only do you need to be available for the training, but the training has to be scheduled at a time that you can attend it, and those sort of things. So I would say if you've got absolute availability, give it 3 to 5 months. So minimum 12 weeks, but certainly we try and move that through as quickly as possible. What is the demand for long-term foster carers? It's pretty high as well, quite a lot of the time. In terms of a young person will come in as a short-term. This is what we do like to assess our carers and have them approved for short-term and long-term, so that if a child comes in for the short-term and we can support a family to live through that uncertainty of whether or not a child's going to be returned. But if it's all working really, really well, we can move straight to long-term and the child doesn't have to move on. So there's always a constant progression of children requiring care of all different types. And at the moment, the statistics do lean very, very heavily toward most children that come into care end up requiring long-term care. However, having said that, often if they do have a network that pops up and says, hey, I heard this child was in care and I'm related and I really want to look after the child, let's not have the child there, there may be a push to have them placed with family or kin. So in that situation, sometimes long-term care ends up being within the family network. But quite often you do find that long-term, and yes, it is a steady demand for carers of all types. Yes, there is emergency care just for newborns. So in terms of the approval that we get for foster carers, you can be approved to care for children 0 to 2. And then you can be approved to care for children 0 to 17 or just 6 to 12, or approval age groups we can put in. But we do have carers, and we do have a need for carers to be approved for just newborns and in that emergency space and short-term space, while real considered assessment happens of the birth family. And there's just an extra training for caring for newborns, which is Safe Infant Care Practices, which is just another little certificate that's required, which covers all the SIDS and everything that's necessary to be able to provide safe infant care. My husband will be on an aged pension, but I won't be. Will that preclude us from fostering? Absolutely not. Most definitely. There is probably the medical assessment in terms of the letter from your GP with regard to, but the average age of our carers, the average age of carers is around the 65-year-old age. And certainly we support carers of all ages to provide care, and the age pension. Also the income, the reimbursement that happens with foster care does not affect the aged pension. If you are on pension or benefits of any sort, it's a tax-free reimbursement. So any money that you receive for providing foster care is not doesn't need to be claimed. It also then does enable you with a letter of support to not have to meet the requirements for doing volunteer work or looking for work requirements. If you're caring for a specialist child and you're unemployed, you then get an exemption from having to look for work, things like that as well. Thank you, Michelle. You will get yourself a call soon, I imagine, if you've not already left. Sorry, I have not seen. Oh, she's already gone. Are we able to get a recording of this webinar? Absolutely, you are. What will happen after this is that you'll get an email from us saying thank you very much for attending. And here is a copy of this. The chat box and the participant box doesn't come up in the recording, so you will just get to see mine and Deb's lovely faces across the recording, but certainly, yes, you'll get a link to this shortly, and a very big thank you. Thank you, Esther. Sharon will also email the callback form in the email as well. And thank you, Lynn. I do try to make it as informative as possible and do appreciate your attendance. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And if there are no more questions, feel free. Happy to hang around a bit if you want to save your question until after more people have gone. I'll be here for a little bit. But thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Cassie, and I appreciate that. That's terrific. You're welcome, Nina. Thank you. I've spoken to someone from LWB just to inquire. I'm unfortunately not ready as yet, as I require a spare room, but have learnt a lot from tonight's meeting. You are more than welcome, Jane. And most definitely, let's if you're going to get a spare room soon in terms of moving to a bigger place or anything like that, get the process started now, because we can do the home safety check later. But absolutely appreciate you spending the time to listen and hear what we've got to say.